You won't believe what I found inside my own house, something that tore my family apart. My name is Claire Maddox. I built the lake house with my own hands design layout materials, all carefully chosen for one reason: to recreate a feeling I thought was long gone. It wasn't a business move or a retirement investment. It was something more sacred. I built it because of one smile. It was 1990 and I was 7 years old. We had rented a tiny cabin near a lake in northern Wisconsin. It was one of those foggy summer mornings where the water mirrors the sky and the world feels paused. My mother stood on the dock laughing. Not politely, not for a camera, really laughing. Her hair was down wild from the wind, and her arms were raised like she could take flight. That moment embedded itself in my memory like a photograph with sound. I'd never seen her look that light since. So when I turned 38 and sold the second tech startup I'd helped build, I didn't buy stock portfolios or take a cruise. I bought land on the shore of that very lake. I wanted to give her back that smile. The house I built wasn't huge or extravagant, but every detail was a whisper of that day. The wraparound porch was wide enough for 3 chairs and a cup of coffee at dawn. The living room windows caught the sunset just right. The guest room faced the lake so Mom could wake up to the ripple of light across the water. I never told her why I chose that land. I never said, "This is for you." I just imagined handing her the keys someday and hearing her say, "You remembered." My family called me practical responsible a doer, they said. I didn't get invited to spontaneous brunches or group chats full of emojis. I was the one who had it together, which somehow meant I didn't need to be included. I paid off my brother's second DUI fines. I covered my parents' HVAC repair when it gave out in a blizzard. I never asked to be thanked. I just thought one day when it really mattered, I'd be remembered. And then, I wasn't. But that's a story for later. Right now, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever built something, an idea, a space, a future, around someone who didn't even know they were in the plan? If you've ever dreamed of surprising someone with a gesture so thoughtful it would make their eyes water, leave a like. Because sometimes we give quietly, and sometimes we wait too long for someone to notice. Back then, I thought I was setting the stage for joy. I didn't know I was building the scene of my own exclusion. I didn't know that the smile I'd wanted to bring back would bloom in that very house, just not with me in it. I suppose that's the risk of building dreams for other people. You can't control whether they walk into them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, I loved her. In a quiet, grown-up way. With cedar beams, brushed steel fixtures, and a hand-carved rocking chair that reminded me of the one from our childhood porch. And somewhere deep down, I really thought that when the time was right, she'd step through that door, feel the air shift, and say, "You did this for me, didn't you?" Instead, she walked through it for someone else. Well, I wasn't even invited. If you've ever been left out of a moment you built with your whole heart, stick around. Because the rest of this story, it's for you. They say when you're the dependable one, people forget you're also human. That you can be hurt. That you can feel forgotten. I've been called all sorts of things: disciplined, high-functioning, even emotionally efficient by one ex. But none of those labels ever came from my family. To them, I was just Claire, the big sister, the steady one, the one who always picked up the pieces when things fell apart. My younger brother Ethan was the opposite, charismatic, spontaneous, someone who could get away with forgetting birthdays simply by showing up with a grin and a last-minute gift bag. He was the kind of person who knew how to be loved loudly while I loved quietly. Ethan was 10 years younger than me, a pandemic baby raised in a different rhythm than mine. Our parents were older when he came along, more tired, more lenient. I don't resent that. He brought laughter into a house that had grown a bit hollow. But even as a child, I knew the difference. When I made honor roll, Mom said, "Of course you did." When Ethan passed his driver's test on the second try, there were balloons. Over the years, I helped where I could. I didn't flaunt it. In fact, I kept most of it to myself. I paid off Ethan's college debt when he dropped out halfway through his second year to start a podcast that went nowhere. I covered the vet bill when his dog Mocha swallowed a sock. I bought our parents new windows after a winter storm cracked theirs. No one asked. I just did it. But the hardest part wasn't the giving. It was that no one ever asked why. Why I worked late into the night. Why I never took vacations. Why I chose to build a life alone. To them, I was just the background music, pleasant, expected, and always on. The lake house was supposed to be different. It was the one thing I didn't build for the sake of helping someone else. It was for her. For Mom. I pictured her there in every season, reading by the fireplace in winter, planting herbs on the porch in spring, waving from the dock in summer. I imagined bringing her there after she retired, handing her the keys like a silent love letter. But life got busy. Between work deadlines and rising COVID concerns, I didn't visit as often. I kept inviting them every few months with gentle texts like, "Come up next weekend. The leaves are turning." I got vague replies, "Maybe soon," or "Let's wait for warmer weather." I thought they were just being cautious, thoughtful even. I didn't know they were waiting for the perfect moment to take it without me. It's strange looking back. There were no arguments, no rifts, just a slow drift toward absence. And maybe that's why it hurt more, because when someone actively pushes you away, you at least know where you stand. But when they simply forget to include you, it makes you question whether you were ever really there. If you're watching this right now and thinking, "That sounds like me," if you've ever been the quiet one, the responsible one, the one no one checks on because they assume you're fine, pause right here and share a moment like that in the comments. Not for sympathy, but so we know we're not alone. Because sometimes the strongest ones, the ones who never ask for help, are the ones most easily overlooked. And the saddest part, we've trained them to think they deserve it. The next part of this story. That's when I found out on a random Sunday morning that everything I had quietly built had been used, celebrated, and posted online. Without me. And that was the moment something in me began to crack. Not because they threw a party, but because they didn't think I needed to be there. It was a Sunday morning in late April, one of those still quiet days when the lake looked like glass, and the world hadn't yet decided what kind of mood it would be in. I had just poured my second cup of coffee, sat down with my laptop ready to dive into client projections when my phone buzzed on the counter. A Facebook notification. It was Ethan. He had tagged our mom in a new photo album. I didn't rush to open it. That's the strange thing. Some part of me, some small buried instinct, already knew this wasn't going to be something I'd feel good about. The album's title read, "Surprising Mom at the Most Beautiful Place to Celebrate 70 Incredible Years," and just beneath it, "Couldn't have asked for a better day with the people who love her most." My thumb hovered over the screen longer than it needed to. I stared at the words. My stomach did something tight and cold, like it knew before my mind caught up. Then I tapped it. The first photo loaded. There was Mom in a pale blue dress, laughing, a hand over her mouth as she leaned toward a cake covered in pink roses. The background, I knew it instantly. The wicker chair she sat in, I'd driven 4 hours to pick it up at a vintage market because it reminded me of her childhood porch stories. The next photo widened. The porch, my porch, the railing wrapped in fairy lights, paper lanterns glowing, the lake stretching beyond the edge of the frame, catching sunlight like a mirror. And standing behind Mom, hands on her shoulders, smiling like she'd just solved Christmas. Ethan. I felt the breath leave me. The images kept coming. A musician with a cello on the deck. Plates of food. My quartz countertops, the ones I debated for weeks. My oak table. My cedar beams. Cousins, neighbors, even old college friends of Ethan's I hadn't seen in years. Glasses raised, toasts made, but not a single mention of me. No tag. No, "Thank you, Claire, for letting us use the lake house." No blurry photo of me in the background. No seat at the table. I kept scrolling, hoping. Not hoping to find myself smiling in a photo, just existing. But I wasn't there. Not in body, not in words, not in memory. I called Ethan. No answer. 10 minutes later, he texted, "Oh, hey, yeah, kinda last minute. Didn't think you'd be around." Mom really needed a lift. Turned out so sweet. So sweet. I didn't know what to feel, first rage, sadness, or that old familiar emptiness that comes from being invisible to the people who know you best. I dialed Mom next. She picked up fast. "Claire, so good to hear your voice." "You had your birthday at the lake house?" I asked. I already knew the answer. I just wanted to hear her say it. Pause. "Oh yes, Ethan set it all up. He handled everything. You knew and you didn't tell me." "Well, we figured you were working, and Ethan said it was short notice." Honestly, it was just a little thing. 40 people at a catered party isn't a little thing, Mom. It wasn't about the size. It was about the feeling. Ethan made it feel special. I sat with that. Then she added cheerfully, like she was offering comfort, "You know how you don't really care for big crowds." That's when I said it. "I care when I'm erased from the picture." She laughed gently, like I was being melodramatic. "Claire, don't be dramatic. It was just a party." But it wasn't just a party. It was the moment I realized they weren't just forgetting me. They were rewriting the family story, and they decided I wasn't in it. That evening, I opened a bottle of wine I had been saving for a special moment. A Brunello I'd brought back from a solo trip to Florence. I'd imagined opening it on a day like this, Mom's birthday, sitting together on the back deck, watching the lake melt into dusk. I pictured us wrapped in soft blankets, laughing about old times, maybe crying a little too. But instead I sat alone. The wine was rich and complex, just like I remembered. I poured 2 glasses out of habit. One for me, one for her. I drank mine slowly, hoping it would blur the sharpness in my chest. Then I poured the second glass down the drain. Later that night, I checked Ethan's Facebook again. He'd posted more pictures, candids of Mom holding the shawl I had mailed her the previous Christmas. A delicate wrap made of cashmere and silk I'd selected because it reminded me of her softness beneath all that strength. The caption under the photo read, "She's never felt more loved." I didn't reply. I didn't like or comment. There didn't seem to be a sentence I could write that wouldn't make me sound small or cruel or invisible. So instead I pulled open the junk drawer in my kitchen, the one that held batteries, pens that didn't work, and one old lined notebook I hadn't touched since college. I opened to a blank page and started to write not a letter, not a message, just memories. The flu winter of 2003. Mom and Dad were both sick. Ethan was 6 and scared. I was 17. I made soup, called in prescriptions, ran the washing machine twice a day. Ethan kept crying for someone to read to him, so I recorded my voice reading his favorite book and left it playing on a CD player by his bed. I wrote down the night in 2012 when Ethan nearly flunked out of community college. I'd driven overnight to speak to his advisor, pleaded for an extra chance. He passed. He never knew why. I wrote about the time in 2017 when Dad's plumbing shop was a week away from foreclosure. I wired in $18,000. They thought it was a tax refund. I let them think that. Line after line, page after page, I cataloged the invisible. Every small, quiet thing I had done to keep this family upright. And as I wrote something inside, me shifted. I realized none of it had been for recognition. That was the problem. I had built an entire identity around being invisible, believing that the right thing done silently was more noble, more pure. That love was real only if it didn't need to be seen. But in a world where visibility is mistaken for value, that belief doesn't hold up. Ethan isn't evil. He's just fluent in visibility. He knows how to show up, how to be seen. He gives hugs where people can watch. He writes birthday posts with emojis and sparkle filters. He leaves handwritten notes on pillows and takes selfies while doing it. He lives out loud. I, on the other hand, work behind walls. I automate care. I project manage love. If you've ever been that person, the one holding everything together behind the scenes, take a second right now and share this video with someone who's never quite seen you. Not out of spite, but because it's time we start recognizing the quiet ones. Because I had done everything to keep the foundation solid. And they had built their celebration over it like I was just part of the floor. It wasn't just that they used my house without asking. It's that they built an entire memory, one my mother would hold on to for the rest of her life, and I wasn't even a footnote in it. A week passed. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't reply to Ethan's cheery follow-up message asking if I saw how great Mom looked. I knew if I responded, then I'd either explode or shrink. Neither of those options served me. Instead, I asked for a cleaning report. I called Melissa, the property manager I hired to maintain the lake house when I was away. She sounded surprised. "Oh, I thought you were okay with the event," she said cautiously. "What event?" I asked, though I already knew. "The birthday gathering," she said. "Ethan told me it was a family celebration you approved, that you were traveling and had given consent." I felt my jaw tighten. "He told you that I asked?" "Yes, ma'am. He said you'd arranged everything with him, that it was fine." She paused, then added, "I never would have allowed it otherwise." And just like that, the full picture came into focus. This wasn't an oversight. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. It was premeditated. Permission was fabricated. My trust had been used as currency. There were about 40 guests, Melissa continued. Catered food, a musician, someone spilled wine in the sunroom. We tried our best to get the stain out. The sunroom. The one I designed with my mother's reading chair in mind. Light-filled quiet surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows. I'd laid out the rugs by hand, chosen pale ivory because it reminded me of calm. That rug now carried a deep maroon blotch, barely hidden under a throw blanket. When Melissa sent me the photos, I examined them like evidence in a trial. There were fine scratches along the hallway floor. A chip on the kitchen island, custom oak from a reclaimed timber yard. Napkin stains on the cream upholstery of the dining chairs. Things no one would notice at first glance, but I noticed, because I chose every damn piece. It wasn't just damage. It was entitlement, and not the loud, aggressive kind. This was the quieter, more dangerous version, the kind that assumes your boundaries are elastic because you've never enforced them. So I made a decision. I opened the family group chat, a space usually filled with birthday gifts and reminders to call Aunt Nancy, and sent one sentence. "We'd love to see everyone for dinner next Saturday. My place, I'll bring food, 6 p.m. No one questioned it. No one asked why. The following weekend I arrived early carrying a lasagna, a spring salad, and a bottle of wine. No one had offered to help. The house smelled like lemon-scented cleaner, like someone had scrubbed it out of guilt or panic. Ethan was already curled up on the couch in joggers and a hoodie that read, "Good vibes only." Dad was flipping through the muted television. Mom was folding napkins at the dining table. We made it halfway through the salad before I said calmly, "Can we turn off the TV? I have something I'd like to go over." Dad looked surprised but reached for the remote. The room went still. I pulled out my laptop and placed it on the table. The first image on the screen, the wine stain in the sunroom. Then the deep scratches on the hardwood hallway. The chip in the island. The photographs lingered long enough for discomfort to settle. "These are from the house," I said. "After the party." Ethan shifted in his seat. "Okay, but it's just a little wear and tear, Claire. It was a celebration. No big deal." "You didn't ask," I said. He shrugged. "It was Mom's birthday. You were probably working anyway." I didn't respond. I just clicked to the next slide, a screenshot of his Facebook caption, the one that read, "Couldn't have asked for a better day with the people who love her most." If you've ever seen your name erased, not with anger, but with indifference, leave a comment. Not for pity, for recognition, for all the times you were left out of a room you helped build. Because that moment, that was when I stopped hoping they'd notice on their own, and started making sure they'd never forget. Hoi ChatGPT. Silence pressed against the walls of the lake house like an extra guest. Mom put her fork down gently. "It was a beautiful day," she said softly, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "Everyone came together. Ethan made it happen." I nodded once, slowly. "And you didn't think to invite me?" I asked, my voice steady. Dad cleared his throat. "We assumed you were busy. You've been out of town so much lately. Deadlines, meetings." "You didn't forget," I said. "You made a decision." Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Oh, come on, Claire. You're acting like this was some grand betrayal. It was a party. We thought it would be better not to pressure you." "Better for who?" I asked, my voice rising ever so slightly. No one answered. "You always make things complicated," Ethan added with a tired sigh. "There's always a system, a rule, a schedule. You built this perfect little retreat and then disappeared into spreadsheets and conference calls. We filled it for one day, that's all." My hands clenched under the table. "You used my silence as permission," I said. "You filled my home, erased my presence, and pretended like I was never part of it." The words landed heavily. Dad looked down at his plate. Mom folded a napkin that was already folded. Then he asked, "So what now? You want an apology? You want us to pay for a new couch or something?" I met his eyes without flinching. "Yes," I said, "I do." Ethan laughed. "You're seriously invoicing your own family?" "I'm holding you accountable," I replied, "for the damage. And for using my property without my consent. If I had done this to either of you, entered your space, hosted dozens of people, left stains and scratches behind without asking, you'd call it what it is, disrespect." Mom finally spoke. "Honey, this isn't a corporate thing, it's family." "No," I said quietly, "it's both." And in that moment, the line between emotional neglect and personal boundaries became clear. For years, I had blurred them, thinking that love meant letting things go, letting people in without asking, staying quiet to keep peace. But peace built on invisibility isn't peace, it's erasure. I looked at them, all three people I had loved deeply and silently, and said I built that house with the idea that one day Mom would live there, that it would be her place of rest, her escape. I designed every inch of it with her in mind. And then you used it for a party that excluded me. You rewrote the story, and you used my name to do it. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. I shut the laptop with a soft click. "You don't have to agree with me," I said. "But you do have to understand this from now on. If you want to use the house, you ask. If you break something, you fix it. If I'm part of this family, I get to be in the room, not just the bank account." Outside, the wind chimes on the porch stirred faintly, clinking against the wood beam like a quiet applause for the truth. No one spoke for a while. The lasagna went cold. But I'd never felt warmer. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't plead for belonging. I just claimed what was already mine, space, voice, respect. For anyone out there who's had to spell out their worth to the people closest to them, know this. You don't owe anyone your silence. Not when they've used it against you. Not when they've taken from you without asking. You are allowed to speak, and they are required to listen. And that night, for the first time, they did. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than usual, and brewed coffee as if it were just another Tuesday. But everything felt different. The air was heavier, and the house, even in its silence, echoed from last night's confrontation. The chimes on the porch clinked softly in the breeze. I let them play. Then I sat down at my desk and opened a new email. The subject line was simple: lake house use, guidelines going forward. I attached 3 files. The first, a PDF invoice carefully itemized. Professional deep cleaning, $312. Upholstery restoration for the wine-stained chair, $620. Hardwood refinishing, $1,950. Minor carpentry for chipped island corner, $340. Miscellaneous supply costs and weekend labor surcharge, $202. Total $4,608.40. I didn't pad the numbers. I didn't add emotional tax or charge for betrayal, just the facts. The second document, a usage agreement for the property. Nothing dramatic. 4 clear bullet points. All requests to use the property must be submitted in writing at least 2 weeks in advance. A refundable $1,000 security deposit is required. Pre- and post-use photo documentation is mandatory. A signed liability waiver for all guests must be completed before access is granted. The third attachment was a side-by-side image comparison before and after the party. My clean white rug versus the stained corner, the unmarked hardwood versus visible scuffs, a still frame of the porch untouched, and then one with string lights still dangling and burned-out candles on the table. I added a short message. Going forward, please use these guidelines if you'd like to access the lake house. As always, I'm happy to share what I've built, but not without respect. Then I hit send. I expected nothing. But 1 hour later, Ethan posted on Instagram a photo of Mom from the party holding a framed print. Someone must have gifted her a candid shot of her laughing with the lake in the background. The caption, "Some people forget what love looks like when they chase money. We didn't. She didn't." No tag, no mention of me, but I was the intended audience. And it landed exactly where he wanted it to, beneath my ribs. That evening, Dad called. His voice wasn't angry, just tired. "Was all that really necessary, Claire?" he asked. "I think so," I said. "You're turning this into something it doesn't have to be." "No, Dad," I replied. "I'm turning it into what it already was. You just didn't want to see it." He went quiet. Then finally he said something that startled me. "You've always been particular. And you've always let Ethan act like he owned things he didn't pay for." He paused again. "I know you've done a lot. I just hate seeing you all this divided." "So did I said, until I realized I was the only one holding the pieces together. That was the moment the guilt lifted. Because here's the thing, families rely on silence. They rely on people like me to smooth over conflict, to write the check, to not make it weird. But silence is a language too, and mine had been misread for far too long. If you're watching this right now and you've ever felt like your love was mistaken for compliance, share this video with someone who needs to know you're done being quiet. Let it land in someone else's inbox the way that Instagram caption landed in mine. Because I wasn't chasing money, I was chasing accountability. And for the first time, they were going to feel it. That night, I didn't respond to Ethan's post. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't even screenshot it for future proof. There are some kinds of immaturity that don't deserve a reply, but I did take one final step. I logged into the smart lock system connected to the lake house and changed the access level to restricted. It was subtle. No locked gates, no dramatic alarm, just a quiet, invisible boundary. The door would now ask questions before it opened. I didn't block them. I didn't slam anything shut. I just wanted them to understand that access, physical, emotional, financial, isn't permanent just because you share blood. It was nearly a month before anyone tried to return. The first text came from Dad. "Coming up Saturday if that's okay. No agenda, just us." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Okay, I'll be there." That Saturday I arrived early. I didn't bake or fuss. I didn't set out the best plates or arrange flowers. I cleaned only what needed cleaning, vacuumed the porch, and left 3 coffee mugs on the kitchen counter, just enough. They pulled up around noon. Mom brought lemon bars in a plastic container. The same kind she used to send to school bake sales when I was 10. Dad carried a folding chair for the porch, the metal legs clanking as he walked up the steps. We didn't start with apologies. We didn't start with anything at all. They entered the house like visitors, awkward, quiet, respectful. It was the first time I'd ever seen them treat the space like it wasn't already theirs. Mom wandered the house, slowly pausing in the sunroom. She ran her hand along the edge of the reupholstered armchair where the wine stain had been. It was clean now, but I noticed her fingers trace the faint border where the fabric had changed. "You kept the chimes," she said quietly, nodding toward the porch. "They sound better in the wind than in theory," I said. We sat outside, just the 3 of us. The lake was still a flat sheet of gray under a thin layer of drifting fog. The kind of silence that isn't awkward, just full. Waited. Dad cleared his throat. I think we got used to you being the one who handled everything," he said. "I did handle everything," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, we just stopped asking if you needed anything in return." I didn't answer. Because there was no good way to respond to a confession like that, one that simultaneously acknowledges and erases years of hurt. Mom looked down at her lap. "I didn't know how much it cost you to be so capable," she whispered. And that, more than the caption, more than the stain, more than the invoice, was the closest I'd ever come to hearing her say she was sorry. I didn't need more. What I needed was what came next. I reached into the drawer of the porch side table and pulled out a photo I'd kept for years. Me 13 holding a box mix birthday cake arm wrapped around Mom's shoulder. Ethan wasn't in the frame, just the two of us captured in a rare, sunlit moment of connection. I handed it to her. She looked at it for a long time. "I forgot this day," she said finally. "I didn't," I said. "If you've ever carried a memory that no one else remembered just so it wouldn't be lost, know this: you're not crazy. You're not needy. You're preserving what mattered even when others let it fade. And that kind of memory keeping, that's not weakness. It's a kind of love." We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But for the first time, they saw the house and me not just as a resource, but as the one who built it. As they packed up to leave that evening, something shifted. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping words of redemption, just quiet, careful movements. Mom placed the empty lemon bar container in her tote. Dad folded the porch chair and walked it back to the car. Before stepping off the porch, he turned and asked softly, "You still want this place to be hers someday?" I paused. The lake behind him shimmered like brushed steel under the late sun. The chimes moved again, wind catching them just enough to make a sound not loud but deliberate. I looked past him toward the hills. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe it was never supposed to be anyone's but mine." He nodded, didn't push. 2 weeks later, a notification popped up on my phone. Zelle transfer 46840. No note, no subject line, no message. Just the exact amount from the invoice. I stared at it for a long time. The numbers didn't shock me. What did was the silence, a transaction in place of an apology. Cold to some. But to me, it meant acknowledgement. It meant for once, someone had paid the tab I was always expected to carry alone. I accepted the payment, quietly. Later that week, I hosted brunch. Nothing fancy: scrambled eggs, a fruit bowl, muffins from the local bakery. I set 4 places at the table on the porch. But when Mom and Dad arrived, only 3 of those seats were filled. I didn't move the 4th. I didn't mention it. Neither did they. It sat there, the unoccupied chair, as still and undeniable as everything we hadn't said. A symbol, not of punishment, not of power, just presence. Reserved for the person who had chosen absence when it mattered most. Some silences say more than speeches ever could. Mom didn't touch the muffins. She mostly stared out at the lake. After the plates were cleared, she stood by the window watching the sunlight ripple through the trees. She turned and said, "It really is beautiful here." I nodded. "Yeah, I thought so too." Then she looked at me, not through me, not around me, at me, and said, "You didn't have to invite us." I know. That was all. We didn't hug. We didn't hold hands. But this time, they didn't look at the house like something they could step into at will. They looked at it like something they'd have to earn their way back into. Like something sacred. And maybe for the first time, they looked at me that way too. If you've ever held space for someone, even when they left you out of theirs, take a second and tell me in the comments what that felt like. Maybe it was an empty chair. Maybe it was a missed phone call. Maybe it was a birthday where your name never got mentioned. Because sometimes the hardest part of love is not the betrayal. It's learning how to stay soft in a world that treats you like you're made of stone. That 4th chair didn't speak. But everyone heard it, and so did I. Life didn't go back to normal after that brunch. It didn't heal overnight. There was no magical reset button. But something had fundamentally changed, and it wasn't just in them. It was in me. For years I had been holding my breath, playing the role of the responsible one, the fixer, the provider. I thought if I did everything right, if I stayed out of the way, kept giving, kept building, eventually they'd turn around and say, "We see you," but people don't see what they assume will always be there. So I stopped assuming they ever would. And I started building boundaries with the same care and precision I once used to build that house. That weekend, I went back through old emails and voicemails every time they had asked for help, and I'd said yes without question. Every, "Can you send a little extra this month?" Every, "The furnace broke again." Every, "Ethan's a little short on rent." I didn't get angry. I got organized. Then I drafted something I called the Family Access Policy. It wasn't legal, it wasn't punitive, it was simply clear. A document that listed out my expectations. Any use of the house must be requested at least 14 days in advance. The house is not a rental, but it is not a free-for-all either. Damages will be logged, reported, and addressed, not forgotten. And most importantly, I am not the background. I am not the maid. I am not the emergency fund. I sent it with no subject line, no signature. Just a quiet, unemotional moving forward. That week, I received 0 responses. But something told me They'd read every word. I didn't need them to clap. I didn't need them to apologize. I just needed the unspoken rules to be broken because silence had cost me too much. The next month, I started doing something new. Every Sunday morning, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of black coffee and write letters to myself. Not affirmations, not gratitude lists, just honest reflections. One of them read, "Dear Claire, you did the hard thing. You said enough without shouting. You drew a line without needing it to be neon. You remembered yourself. That matters more than whether they ever do." I cried after writing that, not because it hurt, but because it finally felt real. If you're still waiting for your family to recognize you, for the thank you that never came, the seat at the table, you deserved the memory where your name should have been, maybe it's time you recognize yourself first. Tell me in the comments, what's one boundary you wish you had set sooner? Not for pity, for power. Because here's the truth: when you stop begging to be seen, the right people either adjust or fall away. Both are clarifying. And as the wind moved across the lake that Sunday morning, I realized something. I wasn't lonely. I was just finally alone on my own terms. A few weeks later, I received a text from Ethan. Just 4 words coming up this weekend. No question mark. No, is that okay? No acknowledgement of anything that had happened. The entitlement was still there, buried but not gone. So I didn't respond. The next day, I got a call from Dad. "Hey, your brother's heading up Saturday. Just wanted to make sure you'll be around." I took a breath. "I wasn't informed he had permission to come," I said plainly. There was a pause. "Claire, it's family." I let the silence sit for a beat, and family follows rules now. Another pause. This one longer. Right. Of course. I'll let him know. I hung up, walked to the porch, and looked out at the lake, now half covered in golden leaves drifting on its surface. Autumn had come quickly, and with it a kind of quiet I hadn't realized I was craving. That Saturday, no one showed up. No one texted. No one called. And for the first time in months, I exhaled. They were learning. Maybe slowly, maybe awkwardly, but still it was something. Later that evening, I received a notification on the Smart Lock app. Ethan had tried to open the front door at 2:14 p.m. The system had denied access and sent him an automatic message: authorization required for property entry. Contact homeowner to request access. He hadn't contacted me. Instead, I saw him post on social media again, this time a selfie on a hiking trail 30 minutes away from the lake. The caption, "Sometimes nature's the only place that gets you." No tag, no mention of me, but again it was meant for me to see. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I lit a candle, played soft music, and opened my journal. I wrote, "Boundaries are not walls. They're bridges with toll booths. The toll is respect." Later that week, Mom sent me an email. Not a call, not a post-it, an actual email. The subject line: house use in December. The body was brief. "Claire, your father and I were wondering if we might be able to use the lake house for a few days around the holidays. We would, of course, follow your guidelines and are happy to coordinate in advance. Let us know what dates might work. Thank you." Mom. It wasn't poetry, but it was progress. I replied a day later. "December 20th, 23 is open. Please confirm the number of guests and I'll prepare the agreement. You'll need to submit the refundable deposit no later than December 10th. Happy to accommodate as long as we're aligned." No emotion, no venom, just clarity. If you've ever had to teach your own family how to treat you, drop a yes in the comments. Not to shame them, but to remind yourself you're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to be the gatekeeper of what you've built. And sometimes that means sending an invoice instead of a holiday card. Sometimes it means requiring permission for access to something they once believed was freely theirs. That's not revenge. It's balance. And it's long overdue. As the days grew colder and the lake began to freeze over, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened and everything that had yet to change. Setting boundaries with my family was not an act of hostility, but a declaration of self-respect. I realized that for too long I had allowed the invisible wounds caused by neglect and erasure to define my worth. Now I was choosing to redefine the narrative, not just for them, but for myself. One chilly morning, while sipping coffee on the porch wrapped in a warm blanket, I received a call from a close friend who had been following my story. She said, "Claire, your courage in standing up for yourself is inspiring. How do you keep your heart open when your own family has let you down?" The question lingered in my mind. It wasn't easy, but I had learned that protecting myself didn't mean closing off my capacity to love. It meant loving myself enough to demand the respect I deserved. The lake house, once a symbol of exclusion, slowly transformed into a sanctuary of empowerment. Each creak of the wooden floorboards and every gentle clink of the wind chimes became reminders that this was my space, my story. I began hosting small gatherings with friends who cherished me, filling the rooms with laughter and warmth. For the first time, the house felt alive in the way I had always envisioned. Yet the path to healing was not without its challenges. Family dynamics are complex and change is seldom linear. There were still moments of tension, silent treatments, and unspoken grievances, but I refused to let those moments dictate my peace. I practiced patience not as a virtue that required tolerance of disrespect, but as a conscious choice to maintain my dignity. One evening, as I was journaling, I wrote about the power of boundaries. They are not walls built to shut people out, but fences planted to protect the garden within. This metaphor encapsulated my journey. I was not rejecting my family. I was creating a safe space where love could grow without being overshadowed by hurt. In this space, I also learned to embrace vulnerability. Sharing my story openly on social media was daunting, but it became a bridge to connect with others who had felt unseen or unheard in their own families. Their messages of solidarity reminded me that I was not alone. We were a community of survivors reclaiming our voices. Through it all, I understood that the true gift of the lake house was not its location or design, but the lessons it had taught me. It was a testament to resilience, self-worth, and the courage to stand firm in the face of emotional erasure. As winter deepened, I sent another email to my family. This time it was an invitation not just to use the lake house, but to begin rebuilding trust with respect as the foundation. I offered to meet halfway to communicate openly and to heal the fractures that had formed over the years. Whether they chose to accept or decline was no longer within my control. What mattered was that I had reclaimed my story, my home, and most importantly, myself. If you've ever had to rewrite your own narrative to set boundaries that protect your peace, I invite you to reflect on your journey. Share with me in the comments one boundary you've set that changed your life. Together, let's build a space where we are seen, heard, and valued not despite our scars, but because of them. Because in the end, true freedom is found not in escaping our past, but in embracing our worth. Months passed since that quiet brunch and the new boundaries I'd put in place. The lake house, once a battleground for invisible wounds and unspoken resentments, had slowly begun to heal. Not because my family suddenly changed overnight, but because I stopped waiting for them to see me and started seeing myself. I realized something crucial: being part of a family doesn't mean sacrificing your identity or your peace. It doesn't mean absorbing pain silently or giving endlessly without recognition. True belonging comes from mutual respect, clear boundaries, and honest communication. One crisp fall morning, while I was arranging fresh flowers on the kitchen table, I got a message from Mom. It was simple, yet it meant everything. I'd like to visit the lake house next weekend. Would you be available? I smiled, feeling a mix of emotions: relief, hope, cautious optimism. I replied warmly, outlining the new guidelines once more, reinforcing that respect would always be the cornerstone of any visit. As I prepared the house for her arrival, I reflected on the long journey that brought me here. From feeling erased and invisible to reclaiming my space and voice. It hadn't been easy. It required courage, patience, and sometimes the willingness to be uncomfortable. But it also showed me the power of self-love and the importance of standing firm when it matters most. That weekend, Mom arrived with a quiet grace. We shared a meal on the porch, the late afternoon sun casting golden light over the lake. We didn't rush to fill every silence with words. Instead, we sat together, letting the natural rhythm of the water and wind chimes soothe the past's sharp edges. In those moments, I understood that healing isn't about forgetting or excusing mistakes. It's about acknowledging them, learning, and choosing to move forward with clarity and compassion. I also learned that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. Not a surrender, but a release of the heavy burden of resentment. It doesn't mean forgetting the hurt, but choosing not to let it define your future. If you're watching this and find yourself caught between love and pain, between wanting to belong and needing to protect your heart, know that you're not alone. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to say no. It's okay to build a home in your heart where you are the architect. And sometimes that home starts with a single word spoken aloud enough. If you've ever had to redefine family on your own terms, I invite you to share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be the light someone else needs to find their way. Because in the end, we don't just build houses, we build lives worth living with people who see us fully and love us truly. And that makes all the difference. Life has a way of teaching us lessons when we least expect it, often through the people closest to us. For years, I had clung to the idea that blood meant unconditional love, that family ties were enough to bridge any distance, heal any hurt. But the lake house incident forced me to confront a painful truth: love without respect is hollow, and presence without acknowledgement is absence in disguise. The house I built by that tranquil lake was supposed to be a sanctuary, not just for my mother, but for all of us. A place where memories could be made, laughter shared, and wounds healed. But for a long time, It was a symbol of exclusion, a monument to the silence that had grown between us. That silence was deafening. In the months that followed, I committed myself to breaking that silence, not with anger, but with honesty. I started attending therapy, learning how to articulate my feelings without guilt or fear of rejection. I began writing letters to my family, not to send, but to understand myself better. These letters were my catharsis, a way to unpack years of disappointment, love, and hope, all tangled together. One letter read, "I am tired of being invisible. I am tired of bending to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. I want to be seen, not as the provider, not as the peacemaker, but as Claire. Just Claire." Writing this helped me realize that reclaiming my voice was not just about setting boundaries, but about embracing my identity fully. It was about allowing myself to be vulnerable and imperfect, to make mistakes, and to be loved despite them. I also reached out to others who had walked similar paths. Through online communities and support groups, I found strength in shared stories. People who had been erased, ignored, or undervalued by their families came together to lift each other up. Their resilience inspired me to keep going, to keep insisting on my worth. The lake house itself began to transform, not through renovation or decoration, but through intention. I hosted gatherings where stories were shared openly, where laughter was not forced, and where respect was the unspoken rule. Friends became family. Walls that once echoed with silence now resonated with connection. This journey taught me that family is not always who we are born to, but who chooses to stand beside us. That love must be nurtured with respect, and that healing requires both courage and patience. If you've ever struggled with family dynamics that left you feeling unseen or unheard, know that your feelings are valid. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it is an act of self-care and empowerment. I encourage you to share your own stories or boundaries you've set in the comments. Together, we can create a space where healing is possible and where every voice matters. Because in the end, the greatest home we can build is one where we feel safe to be ourselves, fully, unapologetically, and with love. As the seasons changed and the lake froze over with a thin sheet of ice, I found myself reflecting on how much I had grown, not just in distance from my family's old patterns, but in my understanding of what it truly means to belong. I realized that belonging isn't something you earn by endurance or sacrifice. It's a mutual exchange of respect, trust, and presence. One of the most profound lessons I learned was that love without boundaries is a love at risk of being misunderstood or taken for granted. For years, I had allowed my family to cross lines, both emotional and physical, because I believed that keeping peace meant tolerating discomfort. But peace built on silence and erasure is fragile and unsustainable. I remember a chilly October evening when I sat alone on the porch watching the last leaves fall and listening to the soft tinkle of the wind chimes. The lake was still reflecting the muted colors of the sky. In that quiet moment, I felt a deep sense of clarity. I was not just the person who built the house. I was the architect of my own life, and it was time to live it on my terms. That meant embracing vulnerability, but also demanding accountability. It meant accepting that some relationships may never return to what I hoped for, but that I could still find peace within myself. And it meant recognizing that the love I gave quietly deserved to be seen and honored. In the months that followed, I invited my family back on my terms, clear, respectful, and firm. Not everyone chose to come. Some visits were awkward, filled with unspoken words and tentative steps toward healing. But there were moments of genuine connection, two brief sparks of understanding that reminded me why I fought for these boundaries. If there is one message I want to leave you with, it's this: your worth is not measured by how much you give silently. It is measured by how fiercely you protect your peace and demand respect. If you've ever had to choose between keeping quiet and speaking your truth, share your experience below. Your courage might be the beacon someone else needs. Because at the end of the day, the home worth building is one where you are free to be seen, loved, and whole no matter who walks through the door. The lake was quiet that evening, the water reflecting the soft glow of the fading sun. I sat on the porch wrapped in a warm shawl, listening to the familiar chime of the wind as it danced through the trees. It was a sound that had always soothed me, but now it felt different, like a gentle reminder of how far I had come. The journey to this moment had been anything but easy. From feeling invisible in my own family to setting firm boundaries and demanding respect, I had learned the power of claiming my space and voice. I realized that sometimes the hardest battles are fought not against others but within ourselves, the battle to recognize our own worth and to stop shrinking to fit into a story that wasn't meant for us. As the twilight deepened, I thought about the empty chair at the brunch table, the silent witness to a day I was intentionally left out of. That chair symbolized so much absence loss, but also hope. Hope that one day the silence would be broken, and the story would include all the voices that deserved to be heard. This house by the lake was more than wood and stone. It was a testament to resilience, love, and the courage to rewrite one's own narrative. It taught me that home is not just a place, but a feeling, a place where you are seen, valued, and free. If you've ever felt erased or overlooked in your own story, know this: your presence matters. Your voice matters, and it is never too late to reclaim your space. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please consider subscribing and sharing your own journey below. Together we can build a community where every story is honored, every voice amplified, and every heart healed. The wind chimes whispered once more, carrying with them a promise of new beginnings and a gentle invitation to be seen fully and unapologetically.